about 3 after it. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to stop sharing and reshare for a secret reason. All right. Good to meet y'all. We're good to see you all. Thanks for being here. This is the next in our field guide series, a series of webinars really focused on users of Knapsack, although available to everyone, and designed to help give some context into some of the superpowers of the platform, some of the maybe 201, 301 use cases, as you will, a little beyond the base case. And so today we're going to get into the topic of theming. This really builds on the last one we did, which was focused on sort of design tokens and tokens versus variables in general in Knapsack, what you can do. We touched on a little bit of theme switching in that webinar, but we're going to go a lot deeper here. So before we do that, we've got our shameless plugs. We like content. We like to produce it for you all. We have a couple more field guides scheduled as of now. We've been doing these once a month. Next month, we will be focused on integrating Knapsack into testing workflows. Mr. Jake Love, who's on this call, will be going through some of the magic that we can do with this powerful system of record for all your reusable design and code, and how we can integrate that with automated testing workflows. And then in September, we're going to be getting into cross-platform support. Email support is always one of those things that feels like low-hanging fruit for design systems that there's just not a lot of. Don't see a lot of emails being built with simple components, and there's some great capabilities. And any team who's using Knapsack for web components used for web apps is in a really good spot to, frankly, pretty quickly roll out email support in their system. So excited to get into that in a couple of months. In the meantime, we also do leadership events. So we have these patterns, leadership summits, really designed at sort of director level and above, engineering product design leaders. We do them also about once a month. You see our dates through the end of the year that we have here, coming up in Boston, where I am, in just about a week. Then we'll be bouncing around from San Francisco, Seattle, New York, Austin, Los Angeles, trying to cover all our bases. Head on over to knapsack.cloud/events or knapsack.cloud/patterns, and you can sign up for these. If you aren't a director and above, that's okay. We love to have folks engaged. There's opportunity to come. We may ask, let's use this as an opportunity to get your boss or your boss's boss engaged, and really have some peer-to-peer conversations, build some community, a lot less about Knapsack and a lot more about, all you folks that are navigating similar journeys in different contexts. And yeah, also let us know if your city or a convenient city isn't on this list. Please let us know where you'd like to have us come. You can reach out to us at hello@knapsack.cloud or on LinkedIn or really anywhere that you'd like, and we'll probably find it. So with that, let's get into today. So I'm Andrew. I'm the Chief Customer Officer at Knapsack. I'm responsible for our customer experience. I don't have all that much control over it, other than what we can layer on top of the things like the product itself. And so the other folks that join me here are much more technical and much closer to the metal, as it were, with the product. Mr. Chris Bloom, our Principal Solutions Engineer. Hey, Chris.
Hey, happy to be here and happy to show you guys some code and some real stuff working.
Real stuff. That's right. Great mustache. And Mr. Jake Love as well. Jake's a solutions architect who works with a lot of our customers. Hey, Mr. Jake Love. Good to have you.
Hello, hello.
Awesome. So what are we going to do today? We're going to talk about theming. So I'll go over some quick slides, and then I'll get out of the way and let the folks who actually can really implement this stuff and show you the power of it do the talking. But we're going to go through theming in general. What is theming? What are some of the core concepts that tend to show up? A little bit of a refresher of the last session around tokens and variables, as that will come in handy as we navigate through how these themes are implemented. We've got some concepts specific to Knapsack around asset sets, which is one mechanism we use to target different theme assets or sets of those assets. Crazy. And then we also have a bit of a more dynamic theming approach in line with variables, collections, and modes. If you're familiar from Figma, which is really based on CSS variables, which is the technical mechanism that makes all that possible in a web browser. So we'll go through all that. We'll have time for a live demonstration of all this stuff, which will be the bulk of it, and then Q&A. So please, again, as we go, use the Zoom features, the chat, the Q&A in the webinar, if a little ellipsis or somewhere in your interface, and we'll find that, and we'll try and get to all the questions. And if you just can't get enough, our LinkedIn profiles are being dropped in the chat as well. So you'll find us there. Cool. So what is theming? Probably define it a lot of different ways. This is how we chose to define it for this. In the context of interfaces, digital interfaces, this is the ability to change how something looks without changing how it works. And honestly, there's probably a little bit of nuance in there, but the core idea that I can have a thing that I've built, especially, we work with a lot of large, complex companies like many of you work at. There's a lot of brands, a lot of products, and you know what? We don't need a one button per product line, per business unit, per theme, per brand, et cetera. So how do we take some of those common UI elements and patterns and, build them in such a way that we can swap out the styling, the look and feel without having to reimagine the functionality of these elements? In terms of those core concepts, just touched on one of them, multi-brand, multi-mode, again, nuance in language here, but pretty much everyone we work with has one or more brands, whether that's a seasonal campaign sort of twist on their brand or fundamentally different brands and product lines altogether. There's often user preference. Things like light and dark mode often come into that. There can be things related to topography or, cozy versus compact versus, et cetera, spacing. Localization is another one of these where, the styles, the colors that you use can have different cultural implications in different parts of the world. Now, we don't want to rebuild our banking app just because of that. And so all of these considerations go into how do we think about what we want to make maybe look and feel a little different, even though it's same functionality, under that surface layer. Obviously, tokens go hand in hand with theming these days. Most design system teams, especially digital product teams that we see, are using token-based styling. So I have that sort of root variable or name value pair, and we'll revisit that. And those are the sort of definitions that end up informing how a product or a button or the border radius on the button, all that stuff looks. And in many ways, we can think about a theme as sort of a collection of tokens or the values for those tokens or variables. Composability, scalability, also very important. We see that, these common patterns across a big digital ecosystem can be used in different ways, right? The button that I'll keep talking about is used in checkout flows that are about conversion and revenue generation. They're used in CTAs that get people to a blog post. There's all these different contexts of these different elements. And theming is ideally implemented in such a way that this can be globally applicable to a UI, right? I hit dark mode and everything goes dark mode. We might have sections. We see a lot of teams who will have different modes, a dark, a light, a white, a bright, and there's some freedom to do different sections of a page in different ones. So there is some of that preference of I want it to look a certain way, and it's not just everything's dark or everything's light mode. And then, user controlled as well. I'm sure you've all been on sites that have accessibility features, let you open up a panel or say, you know what, I want to toggle this to high contrast mode or dark mode. And so all these different elements come into like, how do you see themes actually show up in an experience that you're using or building? And then, of course, the technical implementation, there are many, many ways to implement themes, and we'll go into a few of them here, taking the use of Knapsack. But there's also a lot of things it depends on. What, are we using web? Are we in mobile? Within that, what framework or library are we using? Are we talking about this in a design world? Are we talking about it implementing in code? How do we marry those things together when we're looking at different types of tools and technologies, which raises the human and cultural and behavioral part of this. So lots of different considerations, no one right or wrong way to do it. And so we want to sort of bring some awareness to some of the possibilities here and allow us to have some good conversation about how you might specifically do it. So the quick refresher part, we went through this last time. If you didn't join us, there is a difference between a design token and a variable. Variables is a term that's really come to prominence based on, in this context from Figma. A variable at the same time is a term, and if anyone ever took math, right? Variables are the idea that I have a thing that can potentially represent different values. X, A plus B equals C. Those are all variables. I won't get into anything Pythagorean. But variables are going to be an important part of this because it represents that idea of I can change the style or look of something, but it's the same element that's applied. Design tokens are I'd say almost the root concept or a little broader here, which is traditionally has been a name and a value, right? And these will come into play as we get into some of the details of Knapsack around asset sets. But what this means is that one, the variables have a different value based on the context or the mode is the language you use. As you might imagine, that has some big implications for how we do theming because, I can just have button border, or maybe we don't want to get component level, and we'll get into that argument. But I can have one style, and the value of that style or how it appears can change based on some context setting or some mode. we see this. So here, looking at the code example, if you're not a developer, trust we can make this make sense, right? This is showing me I've got brand and I've got a color token and it's got a value, right? So brand color primary is this value, full stop, right? Name value. On the right, we have the same thing, but in variables, and it says I've got brand, color, it's a color token. It's probably doesn't say primary, but it should. And then what I have here is in Arcadia, it's this. And if I select basis, a different brand, the value is this. And so we have one token, but the collection that we use will change, or the mode that we use, sorry, will change the value of it. So again, big implications for theming, the ability to dynamically change out a value. And again, CSS variables is the mechanism that'll allow for that. And so we've supported both of these for almost as long as either have existed or we've existed. So we have the ability to manage your tokens and your variables in Knapsack, including pulling them in from Figma. We have tools under the hood that allow us to transform the agnostic definition in JavaScript or coming out of Figma into something like CSS that can be actually implemented, as well as mobile styles, all the different styles under the sun. And so we're not going to go, well, we might go deep into that, but some of the folks on this call actually worked on a lot of that. And if there's anyone particularly technical, you can get real geeky and go into our open source utilities that actually allow you to see some of the things that Mr. Bloom built that allow us to do some of that fun transformation. But the real point here is how do we then use those things? Right? And so in Knapsack, we have a couple of different mechanisms we use to allow you to experience themes or apply themes to your components. And they somewhat map to the tokens versus variables approach, but they're certainly not mutually exclusive. So the first is asset sets, and we'll show you all this in the product in just a moment. Asset sets are essentially sets of assets, is one way you could describe them. Collections of CSS or JavaScript that you can pass into the playground stage. Playground stage being the little interactive component area within Knapsack. And there's some great advantages of both of these, right? Asset sets are particularly valuable because it's not limited to just theming. We see a lot of things where the component you're showcasing in its real implementation is going to inherit something from a larger element it's within, maybe even the page header, right? That's not, you don't want to change your component to have a thing it's not actually going to have. And so we can pass in those assets or the sets of assets via asset sets. And also, it doesn't require CSS variables. Most teams we work with that are using components in the web are using CSS variables. If you're not, that's okay, not a blocker. We can still do everything with asset sets. And we also see it do things like, I have a component that's small and it has relative positioning within a container, left, medium, left, center, or right. If the container is the width of the component, that doesn't do anything. So being able to set a variable, or that's the wrong term I should use, being able to set some property for the playground stage beyond just the theme, asset sets becomes really valuable. There's a downside, which is it's not quite as dynamic, especially if you're working in the cloud environment. You can change a token, but it won't immediately show up in the playground because it needs to go through a build process to regenerate that CSS artifact that is loaded in. So really powerful. Some use cases will use it all the time. Used to be the main way we did theming. And then Figma said, you know what? It shouldn't be name value pair. It should be name and whatever value depends on the situation. And so that's where what we refer to as sort of dynamic theming it comes into play. And so this is specifically at the implementation side, CSS variables. CSS variables are magical in that they can update a value within a browser environment and see that reflected in real time. So we don't need to go through and build some new artifact. We can actually pass in just a different value into that CSS variable. And so the way most teams we work with are defining their variables, their themes in Figma these days as variables, collections, and modes. You can also do it directly in Knapsack, but a lot of teams start in Figma, pull it into Knapsack through our plugin and our workflow. And then what we have is this really powerful way to see changes that we make to variables directly on production coded components in real time. It also gives us this ability to control the themes a little more granularly. And so we'll see things where we have, on our demo site, we have a brand theme, we have a spacing theme, cozy, compact, etc. We have a motion theme or collection, I should say. And so you can control those independently and choose, I want this brand and with faster motion and, in compact, as opposed to having just one big list, which is sort of how we approach it in asset sets. I guess it's a con. It requires use of CSS variables. It's sort of a limiting factor, but again, that most teams we talk to are sort of using that or heading that way. So one last little slide, just what does this look like? And we'll get into more of this, to drive that home. When you define an asset set, you're literally like, hey, I've got default is light and it's got this CSS and this CSS and this CSS. And down below, I would have dark and it has different CSS that's been compiled. So we're literally, if you get this, we're bundling different sets of assets that you can then point to those different asset sets using the asset sets dropdown. I'll stop that now. On the dynamic theming side, it's a little different where we kind of say, hey, there's this thing, this color, this element this style uses this variable, and then the value of these variables is going to change based on a collection that we choose, right? We choose cozy, we choose light, and so then what Knapsack's little drop down lets you do is essentially change which mode you're referencing in any given collection, and as a result, the value that gets passed in as color text base or as spacing large will change, right? Spacing large may be 32 pixels in, compact, cozy. I always forget which one's which. And in the tighter one may be 18 pixels, something like that, right? So different approaches, different use cases. That's enough for me in the slides, and I don't see any questions yet. So I want to go ahead and pause there and get into the fun stuff. And I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Bloom.
Excellent. All right. Great intro there. We're going to show this in action in various different ways. Feel free to ask questions in chat and we can kind of get into it. I'm gonna share my screen right now. And let's take a look at some code. Let's take a look at some stuff being used for realsies. All right. What you see on my screen right now is an application. This is production app, and it uses exactly one of our custom components. And that's this little guy right down here, this little button. You can see this, right? It says, hey, click me, hello, all right? This is a design component being used in prod instead of, just inside of a happy design system interface. I do want to show that this is our first brand, and it can be light and it can be dark. I'm making it really apparent that in dark mode, it's purple. Okay, we can see our component can change. Here's what's important. I want to show you the second brand version of this exact same component. Let's go over here. We're going to switch over to brand 2. Let's see this in production. Now my button is blue. Okay, well, what happens to my brand 2 button when it's dark mode? Oh, it's yet another different color. Okay, we've run into this question often. Can we do multiple themes? We need to support multiple brands. We need to support multiple modes of light and dark. How can we represent this inside of Knapsack from our Figma definitions, from our Figma collections and variables definitions? I want to show that, okay? So let's start in Figma. Here's Figma. There's my button right there, okay? Here are my definitions of all of my tokens, okay, that make up this button. We can actually see this over the right-hand side. When I click this button, I come on over here, I can see my fill. The color for this thing is a very certain color. And if we go and we take a look at what's going on right here in Figma, it might be a little small, so just zoom in if you can. We're gonna see that I have 2 brands, okay? This is what's called modes inside of Figma's variables. And I have a definition for when my button background is light, when it's light and I hover, or when it's dark and when it's dark and I hover. And I get to do this for both of my brands. We can set out all of these rules. We can let our designers put all of the logic and all of the very specific kind of things that they want to here, and then let's have this stream into our system. So we're gonna actually go to Knapsack now. Let's see this thing working. There's my button, okay? Here I am, brand 1. We saw this light before in production. I want to show you that we can use the power of asset sets, which Andrew just talked about. We're going to inject the right kind of JavaScript, the right kind of CSS into our page. We'll kind of take a look at some JSON, take a look at that in just a minute, but take a look. We are brand 1, light mode, but I want to make it dark mode. Hey, that's what we saw in our production application. So inside of Knapsack, we can represent this concept of I have a thing, but all of our components that we ever make in design systems, we never actually use them all standalone, right? They got to be part of something bigger. They go into an application. There's wrappers and there's providers and there's contents. There's all this kind of stuff. But we want to simulate that, and we can. Let's take a look at what this looks like at brand 2. Okay, we saw this earlier in the running production app. Hey, I'm blue now. Okay, and if you remember, brand 2, if we go dark mode, there it is. Very gaudy. Don't ask me to do your design. I just want to show that these things are changing and they're very, very visible. Let's go back to brand 1 now. Okay, so single component, 2 brands, 2 modes effectively, right, that we can do here. Of course, we've got all of our standard things we can change. Click me, I'll make this, and we can see like, all right, the nice standard knapsack props changing. Let's make this small. We can kind of see all this change, but I want to make it small. But I also want to see it brand 2. There we go, right? We have all of this stuff visible, super, super easy to work with. Okay, now let's change something. All right, first off, green. Green, not a great color. We're in the process of development. Our designers say we want to adjust this to a slightly different shade. Let's look at what that looks like streaming from the variables in Figma to Knapsack, components to production code, okay? I'm actually gonna go right here. We're gonna change our background color. I can reference some other collection. If you'll notice here, I'm doing multiple collections. I have a way that has been kind of working well for our customers, which is like they have a primitives collection, right? It's just a bunch of raw colors. They then have a semantic layer, right? Where we can bring our tokens together. We can give them names. Danger, okay, it's red and it referenced something else. And then we can go per component. This is controversial. I know Andrew mentioned this, but per component, we can define collections of tokens that go to every component. I have found this is a great way for designers to tell dev teams, these are the exact definitions for the 27 different components that we have. Here's your background color, here's your padding, here's your border, here's your font size, right? Very easy to communicate and very easy to change in a single spot. So right here, I'm gonna go change the light mode brand 1 background. I'm just gonna choose a hard color here. So I don't know, let's find a different color. Let's say, oh, let's just make it, I don't know, yellow's pretty good. There we go, yellow. Okay. Notice our little plugin, Knapsack plugin to Figma. Easy, it's right there on the marketplace. You just pull it in. All it does is it gets you a data format that you can get out of Figma. Downloads really quick. You can hop right over here to Knapsack and import. Let's bring those variables in. You can say I've done this a few times today already. And let's import. And now let's go take a look at my button. Light brand 1 background is now yellow. I can see this inside of my design tokens interface inside of Knapsack. Now, how does this affect my button? Like, goodness, right? It's yellow. It's really yellow, but that's exactly what we wanted. We can see that a change we made in Figma that we pulled into Knapsack affects my code for real. Obviously, my hover still goes to green because I haven't changed that value, but we can see that it's yellow and it's pretty gaudy. And if I hop over here to my running application, I have now streamed token definitions from Figma through Knapsack, which I can verify, through to production code where my component is being used. If I want to, I can change a value directly in Knapsack if I really want. I want to change my hover to something else. Let's do this. I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna break that. Let's go make this, I don't know. Let's make this orange. Oranger. There we go. Okay. Let's verify there. We go over here. What do we got here? Hey, I now hovered orange. Did it make it to production? Yes, it did. Okay, so now I've got my hover light mode of my button, and we just went from Figma to Knapsack to production ready code. Okay, now a little bit on how we're doing this. Something really important here is I am using this really cool component library called Chakra UI. It has a phenomenal theming system. I want to point out how we are connecting the Knapsack tokens into the Chakra code, because this is what's really, really powerful about this token system is you can get it into any system that you use, any framework, any preferred methodology that you're going to go write your code, because it's just JSON at the end of the day. So let's take a look at some code. Okay, if I hop right over here, you can see that my design tokens right here, it's just this big file. Andrew actually showed screenshots of this earlier. This is what it actually looks like in real life. It's a whole lot of stuff, right? You don't need to really care about this other than the fact that when it's time to connect Knapsack JSON design tokens JSON to running code, it looks something like this. I want to point out what's going on right here. Okay, it's a little in the weeds, but I am going to zoom in so we can see this. Okay. Andrew mentioned the published utilities that we have for the Knapsack design tokens. There is a get component token function in there that is happy to take your tokens, take the current brand you're on. This is important, right? Am I brand 1? Am I brand 2? Am I brand 3? Am I whatever we want to call our modes? And then reach deep into it and find a value, right? In our case, we want the default light value of a button. But in the case of dark mode, I want this other value. Let's see what this looks like when it comes to design tokens. Okay, I'm going to fold all of these. And let's go take a look at our button. It's in collections, components, button, BG, light mode, brand 1, and then ta-da, that's the value that we changed live. Okay, now this could reference another thing. You can have tokens that reference other tokens, super, super powerful. But I want to show that's the value. That's the neon yellow that we just saw. And here it is in data. So what is really, really powerful here, what I'm just trying to exemplify, is that once we have the JSON, we can wire it up to any framework that already exists. And in our case, we're really leveraging the power of Chakra and the really cool theming system, light, dark, multi-brand system that framework provides us. Super powerful, super easy, super elegant to work with, and most important, very easy for designers to communicate design changes through Figma tokens to the developers in time for developers to wire it all up. We don't have to get into this, but this is how in Chakra you say, I have a button and I want these tokens to line up for all of these different parts of my button. Very, very easy, really expressive. Last thing, we mentioned asset sets before. Asset sets are a way for us to just inject JavaScript, whether it's the actual CSS and JavaScript that we use for our full framework, or something as simple as setting a global variable. Okay, you saw me earlier cheat and mess with this brand right here. I went in and I just changed an inline script on my running application. I can do the same thing in Knapsack with an asset set. I can come in here. I can say, all right, if I've chosen brand 1, make it brand 1 as a global variable. If I choose brand 2, set brand 2 as my global variable. Very straightforward, very easy to do. It can be this simple, or it can be as advanced as Andrew showed by injecting a bunch of fonts and CSS and assets and SVGs and all sorts of other goodies. And that is how we're getting the ability to do all this stuff. Okay, and we're able to switch between brands and be able to see all of these changes. There, brand 1, brand 2 is blue. Okay. Any questions? Did I miss anything? Does anybody want to see more details about any specifics around the code or how we're making all this work? There's a whole lot here, by the way, around this wrapper that you see around our components that does not affect our components. It is just simply simulating what our components would experience when they're actually in a running application. Talk to me.
Yeah, actually, I was just going to ask Bloom,
Yes,
given
sir.
all the work that's been done on the theme layer, the components and all that kind of good stuff there, the end-to-end that you have here from the design software, the plugin, the import process, then ultimately Knapsack, how quick would it be to add a brand 3 from this point?
Yes.
Is this like a
So
walk in the park now, or
yeah,
we're teeing up
well,
underhand
I'm
softball?
glad you asked that, Jake. So this is as simple as hopping right over here into Figma, adding a brand new mode right here on the right-hand side, and being able to just define brand 3. I believe we could even just go right here. I'll just go to the lowest one, go right here, and there we go. Brand 3. Now I have definitions. So inside a Knapsack, if I ever wanted to go and just add a brand 3 in the asset sets, it would be as simple as hopping right here and seeing this go.
That's incredible.
Yep.
Yep.
It really does push the decisions, a lot of decisions around design to the designers. The designers have a lot of power now of setting these rules. And when it comes to coding this, it can be coded in such a way that once the developers wire up the knapsack tokens to the frameworks, theming token definitions, really it's just importing new JSON and all of those changes stream through.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, for the last several years, we have been doing different kinds of webinars to cover different advanced topics like this, breaking into things like theming and the different nuances and capabilities the system has to be able to support these kinds of things. And I think one of the things that has emerged from Figma Variables that's pretty exciting is that it kind of removes one of the layers that used to be required in order for theming to be accomplished, right? In the past, I mean, we've had CSS custom properties for a long time. We've had SAS variables, less variables. And in the past, what you'd need the definition of those variables. You'd need styles, and then you'd need a mapping layer. And the mapping layer, a lot of times, was something that would be manually generated by engineers. And so there wasn't really a full connection where designers could create and release entirely new brands on their own. And so because of that, right, with Figma variables, you've got the variable definition and the mapping layer in one spot now. And so that really does create that cross-functional landscape between designers and engineers where the baton can be handed off, but also designers at a certain point can start running that race by themselves with very limited engineering assistance. So super, super powerful. And what you can do with multiple brands, and of course with taking it another layer with dark and light modes is pretty incredible. So this is kind of the holy grail of sort of like the design integration process.
Exactly. And I want to answer. So Jake ties into Callum's question. Callum asks, we have been using modes for styling dark mode within Figma. Is there a workaround to cater for this? So Callum, you're actually in a very, very common situation that I built this demo specifically to address, because I've also run into this situation where it's really, really natural to go into Figma and say like, hey, I have my theme. I want the dark mode of it, right? So then what we end up, instead of like a brand 1, brand 2 over here, you have a light mode and a dark mode. Okay, super doable, super reasonable way to do it. Where the complications come in is the moment you are asked to support multiple themes that also have to support light mode and dark mode, right? You're probably running into that now. The complexity of that gets pretty multiplicative pretty quickly, right? The way I've actually found to solve this is, one, component tokens, having definitions for tokens at a component level. And then I actually handle light and dark as standalone variables. Rows, by the way, in Figma are variables. They do not have a value until they're part of a mode, like Andrew mentioned earlier, okay? So what I've actually done here is I've treated light mode and dark mode as something that I push to the implementation level, right? Down at the code, at the React code, at the Chakra UI code, okay? I keep my modes as standalone brands, but I actually make the light and the dark actual rows. By the way, you can get fancy with this and have, BG as a group, and then below BG, you can have light as a group and dark as a group. And inside of those two groups, you can then have like color, hover, however you want to do that. But I highly, highly recommend in this scenario, keeping modes for the brand, solving the light and the dark as individual variables.
I was also going to add to that as well, Callum, just to kind of like bring this home a little bit too, that there's lots of ways to cut the cake. And so how we're kind of walking through this is sort of some more idealistic ways that we've sort of done the design system math, as I like to call it, and sort of arrived at this setup. But if you had different modes for dark and light, that's totally fine. In the example that Bloom was showing there, in that drop down where it showed brand 1 and brand 2, you'd likely have brand 1 dark, brand 2 dark. So your structuring would actually still work completely fine for this.
Yes.
It's just that instead of having a fancy toggle on the pattern stage that allows you to toggle that, you'd be doing that manually through targeting and clicking one of those asset sets specifically.
That's it.
Yeah, and I want to show that real quick because we do have that.
Here, let me stop sharing.
Yeah, you're good. We do have that implemented elsewhere, so I got to juggle a couple screens here. So, so I'm going to go over to our demo site, and you all can actually access this demo site. You won't be able to edit it like I am, but we can. It is a public site, so I'll drop that in the chat there. And you'll see this if I go into an individual component. Let's go into our card. The card has a button in there, and in this one, you see we're using. So this is where we're using more of our dynamic theme approach as opposed to asset sets. And this also gets to the last question from Aaron, in that this is not using JavaScript. This is pointing directly at collections of CSS variables that are generated through the Knapsack token pipeline. And here we have different collections: density, motion, theme. You'll notice theme has light and dark for each brand. So similar to what Jake was saying, brand 1 light, brand 2 dark. We have, Arcadia light, which is what it's defaulted to. I have Arcadia dark, and then I have basis light and basis dark. And if I go look at the variables for this, if I go into my theme, you'll see how it's set up. And similar to Figma, we use basically an inheriting approach where if I add a new one, it inherits from the one to the left, and then I can override certain things. And so what this means is, you see where I have light and dark modes defined differently for, background, content, color, et cetera, et cetera. And what this also allows me to do is a couple of things. One, we didn't show this specifically, so I'll show it here. I can actually change some of these values. So, this is color action base is referencing collection, theme, brand, color. And so if I go into collection, theme, brand, color, I could change this. And now if I go back over to where I was and I look at, I think that was basis light, it uses blue now instead of using orange. So there's the real dynamic piece. But also what is important about this, and a common use case we see if I zoom out to a prototype or a page level composition, we often, I mentioned this in the tee up, we see that teams have different themes applied to different sections of a page. And so the best way I'll show this here is if I want to go in and make these cards dark mode and the rest of the theme light mode, I can do that. So let's go in, we're on basis light, that's great. I'm going to go into my grid, which is what the cards are within, and I'm going to apply a different theme specifically to the grid the components that are put within the grid. In this case, it's cards, and I broke it. That's why I didn't actually have this demo set up for that. But I can do it in other cases where I'll show a better use case. In this case, I'll just apply a different theme to the buttons within a card. This is Toby. He's our mascot. He's great. If I go into, the action card here, and I want to go ahead and make those buttons a different theme. Most of them are Knapsack. Let's make them basis light. Those buttons will be blue. The rest of the buttons will be Knapsack. So there's some really cool powers here. This also gives designers a little bit more flexibility in terms of, I want to see what a token or variable change will look like on a component. I can do this right here. There's no build necessary. There's no developer necessary. Once the implementation of the tokens, the CSS variables has been set up, and that goes back to in my slides, when we have this defined, when we have something that says, hey, I'm using, color text base, that's all we need implemented in the component. And then we can go in here and change the values and even add new modes. That's one of the really cool things here. Like, let's say you're doing seasonal brands or whatever. I can go add a new mode. I'll call it something awesome like new mode. All right. And let's just link some of these up real quick. Collection, theme, brand, color. Let's go ahead and make this one something we haven't seen yet, green. And I'll just do that for now instead of all the others. If I go back into my prototype, now I want to go make the theme, new mode. No dev work necessary to roll out entirely new themes, because the contract of how the variables are organized in collections and applied to components is already set. And now adding new modes is to Jake's question of adding a new brand, super easy, right? And if I do it in this UI or I do it in Figma and pull it in, I can then actually raise this as a pull request for my engineers to go review. They can merge it. Cloud. It can deploy the new theme that can be implemented really easily. So there's so many points here, right? Connecting the brand to style decision and implementation, to tokens, to implementable styling code, to shipping to your product and your users is literally a fully connected pipeline. All you need to decide is who does what and where are the approval gates. And we have permissions, Git has permissions. You have NPM packages that go out and need to be updated. So all of this though is a connected pipeline. And it's still, there can be some awkwardness when you're like, well, I have 12 brands and they all have light, dark, bright, whatever mode. Right. This list might get long, but we're all are sort of pushing the ceiling of where this is in the industry, right? And making the most of the tools we have and letting you see those changes affect, real production code and connecting to design and code workflow is really what we're focused on here. But
something I want to point out really quick is that, a lot of frameworks, for instance, won't allow use of CSS bars, just for whatever reasons their limitations are. So, what I was able to demonstrate here was here's a pure JavaScript way of doing it. What Andrew is able to show here is that Aaron, to answer your question, it was well, what if we don't use Chakra? All right, well, what can I do? Andrew just showed CSS vars being generated on the fly, cloud only, no need for local development. The moment you're going, a full JavaScript framework, CSS and JS, we all, are familiar with that, where there does need to be a build step, right? There is also an option through the asset sets to pull that off as well. So, right, you've got two different ways. Honestly, there are many different ways to solve this, but it's really, really flexible, and you've got a lot of options. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I just did, you might not ever do this, but just to show you, just from what I had in Knapsack, I can actually see all of the different formats that exist of implementable code. So Aaron, you asked, hey, I don't know, what if I don't use JSON or any of that? These are all of the formats that we are providing at any build. So in real time, when you're working locally, like Mr. Bloom was, in my case, I was doing this, in the browser, and if I open one of these up, we will see.
Go to collection CSS at the top, very, very top.
Collection CSS. I want to open it in what I'm in Chrome. Let's see it. And let's
boom.
There we go. I added a new mode, and what this tells me is what the values are for anything individually in that mode. And so I just did that in the browser, and I can actually pull out CSS that's usable for it. The reality is you would raise a PR, and this would go through a dev workflow, and it would be really simple because all you're doing is saying, oh, great, there's a new mode. The contract is already set and implemented. But that is just to highlight, any of those formats that you want to use, great, go for it. And including, we provide a format that is designed to work with things like Style Dictionary. For a lot of teams, this replaces the need to stitch together a custom pipeline using Style Dictionary, which is super cool and super powerful. Also, that's a bunch of work to do and maintain. If you're using an out-of-the-box case for Knapsack, you can skip that. But also, we have teams who do crazy custom transforms for their, I don't know, SharePoint site or something that we don't spend a lot of time investing in. And so we want to give you everything you have. This is a draft, the version in the draft W3C community group spec for design tokens. So you should really have everything you need to get this into pretty much anything, right? Android XML, Swift. It's pretty flexible.
We often see, for what it's worth, a lot of teams use like Tailwind, right? So they'll write a little converter that just takes one of these JSON files and shoves it right into the Tailwind format, and they just automatically get the definitions Tailwind ready to go.
Yep. And of course, in a browser environment or in a local environment, you have total control over that application at that development environment. So you want to do some custom scripting, you want to do whatever it is, you have all these things sitting in a dist folder in real time when you're working. And so you have a lot of flexibility. We just try to cut out a lot of steps to make sure that, one, we avoid the manual work, even if it's simple to write some JSON based on a, Figma file you're looking at, or transpose something that came out of a different, Figma plugin. We just try to do some of that work for you. So you go from the style decision to implementable code like that. Thanks, Aaron. I wish I could say I had anything to do with it other than clicking on some stuff, but that's nice to hear that Mr. Bloom had a lot. Cool.
Excellent. Any other questions?
Jake pointed to our docs. There's a lot of the stuff is in the docs. If you're having any questions with that, please email us at help@knapsack.cloud or hello@knapsack.cloud if you're not a customer. And we can make sure we get you set up, possibly with one of these two wonderful people to help you figure out the right way to do it for you, or a right way to do it. There is no one right way. And I love the questions, right? This is I would not say this is a solved space. There's a reason it's a draft spec in there in the W3C community group. Figma has gone very far, but has pretty much admitted that we're not really focused on implementation downstream. We're focused on the decision making and the experience in Figma. And so we're doing a lot to close that gap, but not everything is solved for. So keep pushing us,
Ooh,
cool.
Awesome. Thank you.
With that, we're a couple minutes over time, so please don't hesitate to send other questions. But thank you all for joining. We will send this recording. If you're watching the recording and you made it this far, thank you. Appreciate it. Hope you had a good lunch. We'll talk to you all soon.
Awesome.